we're going to be reviewing for the Unit 6 test on quadrilaterals. So here in questions 1 and 2, we have parallelograms. And what we learned in the properties of parallelograms are that opposite sides are congruent and opposite angles are congruent. We also learned that consecutive angles, the ones that are side by side, add to 180. So here in picture number 1, we have a regular parallelogram. And since we know opposite angles are congruent, angle R is also going to be 135 degrees. In picture 2, angles C and D are consecutive. So what we learned about consecutive angles of parallelograms is that they add to 180. So I'm going to do 180 minus 70, and that comes out to 110 degrees for angle D. Here we have another parallelogram, and what we learned about these are that the diagonals bisect each other. That means that this side and this side of the diagonal are congruent. So 12x minus 17 is equal to 17x minus 82, and we can solve for x. So remember, when you have x on both sides, you need to get rid of one of them. Here I have 5x minus 82. The opposite of minus 82 would be to add 82. That comes out to 65, and if I divide by 5, I get 13 for my answer. Here we have a rectangle. Now what we learned about rectangles are that opposite sides are congruent and each of the angles is right angles or 90 degrees. So if we're solving for x, these two angles form a right angle or 90 degrees. In other words, they add to 90 degrees. So I'm going to add my two angles and set it equal to 90. From there, my next step would be to combine like terms. So 5x plus 3x is 8x, and 8 plus 2 is 10. From there, I'm going to start solving. So the opposite of plus 10 would be minus 10. And then the opposite of times 8 would be to divide 8. So here my answer for x is 10. In this next slide, we have rhombi or rhombuses. The property of rhombi are that all the sides are congruent. Something else we learned is that diagonals are perpendicular, so they form right angles. And the diagonals also bisect the angles at the corners, making those congruent. So here, this is pointing to this middle angle, and we know that's going to be a 90-degree angle. So I can say 8x plus 58 equals 90, and then solve for x. So here I get 4 for my answer. In this next picture, they're looking at one of the corner angles. We know they're bisected. That means they're congruent. So I can say negative 3x plus 50 equals 4x minus 20. And now I can solve for x. Since I have an x on both sides, I'm going to undo one of them. I'm going to get rid of the negative 3x by adding 3x to both sides. Now I can get rid of minus 20 by adding 20. And then I could divide by 7. This next picture, we have squares. The properties of a square are that all sides are congruent, all angles are equal to 90, the diagonals also bisect those corner angles and form right angles as well. So here in number 7, we know all the sides are congruent. So we can set 2x plus 4 equal to 3x minus 5 and solve for x. On number 8, they're looking at one of the angles in the diagonal, and we learned that those all form right angles. So since these form right angles, that means that 3x has to equal 90 degrees. If we divide by 3, we get 30 for our answer for x. Next, we're going to talk about trapezoids. For trapezoids, if it's isosceles, we know that both top angles and bottom angles are congruent. But we also know that consecutive angles add to 180. So here, if angle A is 125, angle B is also 125. But angle B and D are consecutive, so those sum to 180 degrees. So to get my answer, I can subtract 125 from 180, that comes out to 55 degrees. In number 10, they want us to find the length of TS, that's the median. So the formula for median is equal to base 1 plus base 2 divided by 2. Here my top base HJ is 14 and my bottom base LK is 42. So I'm going to add those and then divide by 2. That comes out to 56 divided by 2, which is equal to 28 for the median. Next, we're going to do some problems that have to do with kites. Now, for kites, we know that consecutive sides on the top and bottom are congruent. We know that diagonals form right angles or 90 degrees. And since it's a quadrilateral, all angles add to 360. These corner angles are congruent. So here they want the measure of angle C. We know that one's congruent to angle X. And we know the 4 angles sum to 360. So I'm going to add 80 plus 60, that's 140. And I'm going to subtract that from 360. That comes out to 220. So that means angle X and angle Z add up to 220. But since angle X is congruent to angle Z, I know they're equal. So I can divide 220 by 2. And that gives me 110 degrees for angle Z. On picture 12, we have some of the sides of our kite. They want us to find side BC. Since we know these form right triangles, we can use the Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared, to find the length of side BC. So for this particular picture, the side that had a 4 did not matter. Now here, 169 is not our answer because we want the side, not the side squared. So at the end, we're going to have to square root that. So our side length is actually equal to 13. And then in the last topic, we learned about area. So when you have a trapezoid, to get the area, you do base 1 plus base 2 divided by 2 times the height. So here in our picture, AB is 7 inches, EC is 9 inches, and AD is 5 inches. These are my two bases, and this is my height. So I can plug those into the formula, and I can start simplifying to get my answer. 16 divided by 2 is 8, and 8 times 5 is 40. We want to code units since their area is squared. So my units for this one would be inches squared. On the next picture, we have a kite. The area of a kite is diagonal 1 times diagonal 2 divided by 2. So my first diagonal here is 9 yards. My second diagonal is 6 yards. I'm going to plug those into my formula. So I get 54 divided by 2, which comes out to 27. And my units here would be yards squared. So this video is just meant to help you study for your Unit 6 test. I also uploaded a PDF so you can review these problems on your own if you rather do that instead of rehearing it out loud.